This is Christopher Oury with Notaris. Recently I've noticed that some material has been coming out of the sides of the printer. I believe that this is leading to issues with our prints. So I'm going to remove the hot end and check and see for any leaks. To start this process, you need to unscrew all the screws back here. And you will need to pull this entire mechanism forward. I'm going to start by unplugging the thermostat on account that these cables are very thin and very frail, so they can get broken. I got a special cable that allows you to unplug that. Now that that's done, I'm going to take my screw gun. I'm going to turn it down to one of its lower settings. And I'm going to back all of these out one at a time. I'm going to have to turn it down, turn it up a little more than that. I'm going to continue the video once I've unscrewed all the ones in the back. Now that those have been removed, it's really just these two top ones. The rest of it are for the other mechanisms, so we're not too worried about those. I want to come here and I want to remove my cooling fans. What that's going to allow me to do is be able to pull this entire mechanism forward, and then I should have access to the hot end. And once again, you're just taking this and unscrewing all of these screws. For this cooling fan, you only need to undo these two. For this cooling fan in particular, there's actually a screw located try and figure out right here, and that's the one that you need to remove. Now that I've removed those, this piece here should slide forward. I seem to have issues just sliding it forward, so I'm going to take a second and figure out what's going on. I had missed one additional screw located right up in here, kind of tucked out of the way. Let's see. Yeah, right there. So once that one gets undone, this whole mechanism will slide forward like so. Exercise caution. This system has two magnets inside of it up here. I've moved that so you cannot see anything. So this has two magnets up inside of it. If those slide out, you will have to remove the entire front panel in order to reinsert them. Now you should be able to very cautiously take the hot end and pull it slightly forward and down. There we go, and it will come out. As you can see, there's material buildup all on my hot end, and it seems to be coming out around this space here between my actual hot end and my cooling section. So I'm thinking that this is probably the issue that we've been having recently. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this just by unscrewing it. Now that this has been removed, I'm going to carefully kind of wipe down the inside. There's a white powder buildup on this, so I want to make sure that that's nice and clean. This plastic tube in here might slide in. If it does, there's a black ring up top. You can just pull that ring up and it'll allow you to pull this tube. If it slides down to a point where you can't get it, just take a small screwdriver and push it the rest of the way through and reinsert it in the top. Once again, we're looking at my hot end. As you can see, it's really disgusting. It's covered in all this material. This is actually good that I left my mechanism with this thermostat plugged in. Because now what I can do, it's suggested that when you heat this up, you heat it up using the printer and not any other source of heat. You can use a hot gun, you can use a lighter. It's not suggested, but it is possible. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get a pair of pliers and I'm going to get my cleaning brush. I'm going to plug the 3D printer in and I'm going to tell it to preheat for PETG because that's the material that's coated this right now. Once I clean all this up, I'm going to remove this, check for any clogs, clean everything up again, and then I'm going to reassemble everything and make sure it's all good. Alright, so my nozzle temperature is supposed to be about where it's at now. It's set to 230 degrees. I got it reading at 234. I have grabbed a pair of tweezers, a wire brush, and I've also grabbed these crimpers just in case I need them. I don't think I'll need these. I can get away with just these two tools, but it's going to be easier with the crimpers, and I'll show you why. So what I'm going to do initially is pull off this gunk. Any of this stuff you pull off should just go immediately to the trash. Do not put it on the bed or anywhere like that. Just pull it off, throw it away. For all those people out there, I know I can be one from time to time. This stuff is hot, so you need to exercise caution when messing with it and make sure that you do not actually touch any of the material and or the metal. It will burn you. 230 degrees Celsius is twice the temperature needed to boil water. I'm going to finish cleaning off the stuff that I can get with the tweezers, and then I'll continue. Alright, so now that I've removed all of the much larger chunks from this, and I've gotten the majority of the gunk off, what you want to do is you want to take your tweezers, and you want to hold this metal rung here with them. And then take your bristle brush, and brush on it like this. Now, this is where having these becomes handy, because if you're having trouble using the bristle brush and the tweezers, you can actually grab this end right here, like this. It gives you more maneuverability, and you can be a little rougher with your movements and get all the nitty-gritty off. I'm going to continue to brush this off, and I'll be back. Alright, so now that I've cleaned this off, you can see it looks significantly better. There's still some gunk here and there, but it does look much better than it originally did. I've taken a little extra caution in making sure that the area around this nozzle here has been cleaned off, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this piece here. Now, it should be kind of finger snug considering how much material is coming through, so what I'm going to try and do is hold this and just kind of twist this and see if it doesn't undo itself.
Tracking number goes in the comments on the trailer cards.
Shipping and stuff?
Yeah. In the comments.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Alright. So now that I've removed this, I'm actually going to take my brush. I'm going to brush off all the filament that's on this. In this particular case, I want a little extra grip. So I'm going to hold it using my larger clamps. You do not have a lot of time for this. Once this portion is disconnected, it will start to cool off. So you need to be relatively quick about cleaning off this threads. Unfortunately, there's material that's now lodged in here, and it's gotten too cold for me to push a needle through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinstall it onto this later and clean it. However, right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the needle that I was originally going to push through that, and I'm just going to push it through my hot end nose. Alright. And just make sure that it's nice and clean. My needle's coming out clean. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this needle that I was just using, and I'm going to push it into the hot end all the way through as far as I can get it. Now that that's there, I'm going to take my brush again, and I'm going to brush around that area and clean that up. Now that that's been cleaned up, I'm going to pull this out. You can notice that there was a little bit of gunk left on this from when I was brushing it out. The next component I want to remove and clean. First, I'm going to come here. I'm going to go to preheat settings. And I'm going to tell everything to cool down. I don't need everything at its highest temperature anymore. And I want to remove my heating element. As you can see, it's already been partially removed. So I'm going to take my larger pliers. I'm going to hold this. I'm going to take my smaller ones and see if I can't just work it the rest of the way out. Boom, there we go. Now while this is still hot, again, I want to take my brush and clean this up. I want to do the same with my hot end as well, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to disconnect my thermostat cable again. So now my hot end's free. Still do not manage the hot end without a pair of pliers. It's still very hot. So this has been cleaned up, but it still doesn't look too good. What I'm going to do to kind of clean this up a little better is I'm going to take this over to a heat gun. I'm going to put it over the heat gun until this material becomes a little more viscous, and then I'm going to brush it off. Alright, so I finished cleaning it up. As you can see, it's very clean now. I went ahead and reattached this metal piece here. It's nice and tight. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take my 7mm socket. I'm going to put it here. And I grabbed a pair of clamps for this, just so that way, vice grips for this, just so I can make sure that I'm getting a good tight grip, but it's not too bad, so I'm not going to damage the hot end nozzle. You just want it to be tight enough so that this is secure, but you're not scraping the sides or anything like that. And I'm going to take my 7mm, and I'm actually going to tighten this down as much as I can go. Alright, so that's nice and tight now. I can release my end from that. Now, most people are going to want to put this on and then reinstall this, but you need to install the thermostat before you continue. In this particular case, I kind of want to run my thermostat up here instead of its original run. I don't have enough length to do that though, so I'm going to see if I can't pull a little extra down. I can't pull anything down, so I'm just going to reinstall it. Now, this does not want to just slide back in, so I'm going to take a small hex key and undo this screw here. This is probably the wrong one. Okay, so what I just found out was there's actually filament on the inside of my hot end. What I had to do is I had to clean out the inside by heating up my hot end, pushing it through, and pulling it back out several times. After I did that, after a few times, I tightened everything back down and it's good to go. There's still a little filament on the edge here, so I'm going to brush that off. I would like to point out that every time I was done pulling it out, I actually did wash off the hot end. So I was using the hot end almost like a sponge to get everything out. Now what I'm going to do is make sure everything's nice and cool. So it's still a little hot. Once everything's nice and cool though, I can install my nozzle here. What I kind of want to do prior to that is check my lead nozzle, which is this clear tube right here. Now, there's not much I really want to check. I want to make sure that it's still clear, that there's no filament inside of it. As you can see, there's no clogs inside. It goes through and through, and it has both one end has an angle, the other end does not. Make sure when you install this, the end with an angle goes down into this like so. Now, when this pulls up, it's locked into position. When this goes down, it moves. I don't want to install this completely just yet. I want to wait until this is cooled off and I can physically install this. I'll continue once it's cooled off. Okay, now the hot end's finally cold enough for me to touch and handle with my bare hand. It's easier to use just your hand with this as opposed to using pliers or anything else to maneuver everything. All of this should be hand tightened. So this portion here, I actually tightened down with my pair of clamps as it was where it was coming where we had the leak earlier. I'm going to take this though and tighten it by hand. Now, for some reason, it doesn't want to go in. So this is where I'm just going to pull out this plastic tube. So I paused the video for a second to figure out what was going on. There's actually a little bit of material caught in the thread, so I'm going to have to clean that out. To do that, I'm just going to take a heat gun, set it on its highest setting. I'm going to hold it there for a second. The heat gun's going to allow for a more direct blow, so you don't have to worry about heating up everything again. I can also, in a concentrated manner, keep it just to the spot that I need. So my hot end actually doesn't heat up, but this does. And then I'll take my bristle brush and kind of just brush it away. Okay, so now that I've kind of brushed it out, once again I'm going to take my hot cooling fans and I'm just going to screw it down. This needs to get screwed down as far as it can go. It's typically to the end of the ribs. Make sure it's nice, tight, and snug. So you should reach a point where you cannot tighten it anymore. You should not need any tools to tighten this down. You can actually damage these ribs if you do that. So it's smart not to. Now, I've made sure that my end plugging into here is nice and tight. Everything's nice and tight. It's all connected properly. Keep in mind that this barrel right here, this nozzle, needs to be flush with your hot end. Alright? The rest of this center rib here can come up a little bit, but these two need to butt together inside. And this must be flush. So I always tighten this down just to about 2 or 3 tightens less. I then tighten this down, and then I turn around and I tighten this the rest of the way, and that kind of butts them up together and gets it nice and good. Take your cone here, the cone pointed end, and slide that in until it cannot slide down any further. Next, make sure that your cables are running the right ways. Now, reinstall your nozzle. I want to point out that during this build, I had earlier closed this back up to prevent the magnets or anything from moving out. So once again, I'm going to carefully pull this out. It looks like one of my magnets is coming out with it. Nope, we're good. Alright. So now that that's been pulled out, I'm going to take this end and slide it back up in here. There we go. And then slide everything back down. Alright, now that that's all good and tight, I'm going to take my screw gun again. This is why we set it to the lower level earlier. Now when I go and tighten these stuff down, it'll reach a maximum tightness and then it'll click out. I'm going to have to turn it down a little bit. And now it's at its max, won't go any tighter. Alright, now that those two have been put in there, I had set my screws for my my cooling fan to the side earlier. So I'm going to take these two screws, I'm going to install them back here and here. And I'm going to screw them back into place. Finally, I'm going to come back to the back and I'm going to put in the last two screws that were back here. Alright, so now that we're back here, you can see that these two screws at the top were the only two that I actually removed. And I'm just going to tighten them back down. So that one's good. Now that one's good. Now that all these are tightened, if you want to, run through one more time just with a socket wrench. Just to tighten everything up, just a little extra. Make sure it's snug. I only go about 2. Two quarter turns, so basically 1/2 turn. Alright, now that that's completed, your printer should be ready to go. Now, earlier I had mentioned I wanted to move these up out of the way. I did not have enough cable length to do that. So the next thing that I'm going to do to try and prevent this from being an issue in the prints is I'm going to see if I can't remove these zip ties and pull this so that way it keeps this stuff held up like this. So kind of against my better judgment, I decided this was the right way to do it. I actually removed my cables from my computer and I'm going to feed them the way that I want them to be fed. I figured I'd pop a look inside, see how much slack there was, and figure out how I could coil it up a little better. And there was just another 1.5 feet worth of slack. So I figured my best option was to actually take the moment and recycle this cable the way I would like it to be. So I'm actually going to fold that over my x-axis like so. I'm going to make sure it's not getting in the way of my motion. It is, so that's not going to work. So I'm going to see here, it looks, so what I did is I took a very small drill bit, I drilled a small hole in here and just kind of fed this through with a zip tie, and now that's keeping all my cables up, and now this will keep all my cables kind of out of the way as they feed through together. Now I'm going to take my zip ties and go through this one at a time and reattach everything the way it's supposed to be.